Okay, so here we're going to dive into the third key. Again, I'll recap again. I think I did this on my last episode, and I ended up just going into more detail than I thought I would. So let's recap into day one was thinking and believing correctly, as we're talking about transforming our mind, our bodies, and our business. And so transformation of the mind and thinking correctly is key number one to building the life that you're called to live. And I think we underestimate the power of the internal transformation, what I call mastering the inner game. Because if we can't get that part right, if you're not growing in any part of your life, it always starts in here. And when I figured that part out, and when I started applying certain principles and retraining my mind to think a certain way about certain things, I started to grow, and I saw it reflecting in other areas of my life, like in our finances and our business growth and all of these different areas. The second key is believing and thinking correctly based on the scripture, based on who God says you are, what is possible, based on what he said your circumstances and what should be happening in your life, leads to taking correct action. And remember, faith is action. Faith is acting on the word of God with confidence. It's the Rhema word. And so when we have correct belief, can also be hope. Hope and belief are two different things, but hoping for something, it's like this projection that God puts this vision in our heart, and it's his blueprint for your life. That's hope. Who hopes for something he already has? And so when you think about faith, it's when God shows you what's possible. That's what hope is. And then when he says, okay, go do this, or he highlights something to you in scripture, you just have a knowing that, hey, this is the direction I'm going to go. You step out fully. But in business is so much more practical than so many believers have made it. And so too many Christians are trying to pray their way into success. They're trying to pray and fast, and they're not seeing the growth that they want. I'll tell you what, business is a mind, and it's a heart and mind strategy. It's a game that you have to learn how to play, and you have to master it, and you have to master your inner game, and you have to master your emotions, and you have to become wise in your business dealings, and you have to be knowledgeable of your craft and perfect with excellence. And so taking those actions, and I shared some frameworks in the last a couple episodes ago. So make sure you are paying attention to the practicals. As Christians, God will bless the work of your hands. He will guide you into all truth and show you where to go. So let's dive into the third key here, and that is getting in the right room. And so I want to tell a story about all the different times that I can look at exponential growth. And so if you want to go far, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And so getting in the right room, I want to explain this a little bit. So when I first started my company, I had a vision that God gave me. He showed me this blueprint in a dream. And as I was beginning to shift my mind into what I could be a learner, I could apply myself, I could do great things and do hard things, all of those important things. I was growing. It took us 10 years to have really solid breakthroughs. So we went from farmers markets, which in that time, everything we were making, the majority of that revenue was going back into our business. And so we went from farmers markets. I did our first $1 million in less than 6 months when I finally figured out the online digital marketing game. We did $1 million in less than 6 months. We did our first 130,000 in 6 weeks with the web. And then we did our first 8 figures in less than 2.5 years. But that was already more than 10 years into building steady consistently. And so then here's what happened. I want to talk through the storyline, the milestones of when I went from farmers markets into exponential growth, where we hit that first $1 million in less than 6 months. And then hitting that 8 figures, we did our first 10 million in less than 2.5 years. It was because I got into the right room. So when I aligned my thinking with my actions, we had steady, consistent growth, and I was stewarding faithfully. And when I got into a room with a mentor who had already accomplished things that I was looking to accomplish in strategy, in marketing, and in business, and then I got around a circle of people that were building successfully, I went from, I catapulted into exponential growth. And so after we did that first 130,000, I got into the right room. I had access to a mentor who had already gone through some of the struggles that I was going through as a business owner. He had already mapped out and had executed on a strategy that I was still in the beginning stages of working out. And not to mention, I was getting around, this whole entrepreneurial journey. People talk about it being lonely. I never felt lonely. I never felt like I really needed anyone to like pat me on the back, or as a matter of fact, I think that's characteristic of most entrepreneurs. Like, we're not looking for anyone to applaud us. I was always putting my products in front of people. Like, I was kind of the man behind the curtain, behind the scenes, and putting my products out there as little soldiers, because I knew that they could go out and do the selling for me because they're that good. And so when it was time to exponentially grow, I've also talked about how what got you here won't get you there. So what got me to that, some basic steady growth in the farmers markets, that wasn't going to cut it for me to do a million, or to sustain a million, or to go from a million to 10 million. And so I got into a room with successful business owners and a mentor. And so the Bible talks about this. He says, do not be deceived. Bad company corrupts good character. And so I know that we could talk about that in the context of friendship. We could talk about that in the context of family and relationships and toxicity. But I also like to consider that in the context of business, because if you're building something big and you're really, wherever it is that you're going to the next level, you've got to get around people who are winning, who are building, who are growing, who can sharpen you. As iron sharpens iron, so one man sharpens another. And so I found myself in a place where friends that weren't growing in the same direction, or weren't even growing at the same rate that I wanted to grow, of course, still love those people, but I had to get into a room where people were thinking differently. And so going back to this idea of thinking correctly, I used to always hear like, oh, he did that because of the way he thinks. Or I used to hear all the time about mindset, and I used to poo-poo that, like, okay, mindset, whatever, that's just, everybody makes a big deal about mindset. It's actually about what you're doing. And I thought it was all about the hustle, and it was all about the strategy. I didn't realize how important the mindset actually is. And so as I began to grow, I took that idea more seriously. And now looking back, I can see where when I made my, when I was retraining my brain and thinking differently and thinking correctly, so much increase happened when I started thinking and hearing how other successful people were thinking. And I can give you an example. How many times have you been in a room and somebody is like pinching pennies? Now when I actually have a filter of, am I going to try to save $20 by returning this, this thing at the grocery store or at the store? Or is my time too valuable to mess with it? And that might be a really bad example. Nathan always laughs at me because he's like, your analogies are terrible. I'll come up with some good examples for you. But how many times have you been in a situation where you realize, okay, I was thinking like this, and now I've gotten around this other group of people who are successful, and they think so differently. And so I started thinking differently. I was already thinking in terms of billions, but I was thinking bigger in terms of strategy and what I could do with the strategy once I started to learn from a mentor who had a marketing strategy, who was successful in those different areas. And so I want to encourage you right now that if you are, no matter where you are in your journey, it's so important that you get into the right room, that you have a mentor. This is actually one reason that after many years of many people asking me, when are you going to have a mastermind? And I thought, I'll never have a mastermind. I'm a business person. I'm not a coach. I can mentor people one to many. I can write books and do a podcast, but I'll never have a mastermind. After having a lot of discussions with Nathan, as I've been going back to the beginning and thinking through what the her effect is, I feel like the only way for me to properly serve women on that level is to have a mastermind eventually. And so these are some ideas that I'm stewing on right now. I'd love to hear your feedback on that, but wherever you are right now, find a mentor. And a mentor doesn't necessarily mean sitting down and doing coffee with someone. It's listening to their podcast. It's reading their books. It's following their social and watching their posts and seeing going to their YouTube channel and studying what they've done. And if they have a mastermind and they have what you want, then join the mastermind and invest in yourself. That's the first thing that's the first time I ever wrote a check like that before. It was $25,000. So imagine this. At the time, Nathan had just I think 8 months prior, maybe even less than that. No, it was like 4 or 5 months prior. He was a full-time teacher, bringing home, I think at this point, we were making $42,000 before taxes every year. And so what is that? $3,500 a month before taxes. So you do the math. It would have taken us almost an entire year to come up with 25 grand. Well, when our ads started converting, I knew I needed to get in the right room. And so we sat down and we were like, okay, I need a mentor. And I'm going to sow a seed into myself. Don't underestimate the power of sowing into yourself as an entrepreneur. We have to do that. And so I wrote the check. It was the best decision I've ever made as far as in that context of business. And so invest in yourself, learn, go to conferences, buy the books. I have so many books. I have studied and studied and studied the greats, and everything from biographies to books that are coming out, things like Atomic Habits and Persuasion. And there's another really great one that my friend Allison Prince, and if you're not following Allison Prince, please follow her. She's amazing. What was it called? Essentialism, I getting my hands on some of these amazing books, that's mentorship. But man, the fact that I could get into a room with this mentor, I was like, okay, this is where I need to be. And we grew even more exponentially from there because I was getting the mysteries and I was getting my hands on secrets that I wouldn't have known had I not been in that room, right? So I want to encourage you right now. You're on this path right now of beginning to think correctly, even bigger, even more differently than what you already are, and doing bigger and bringing your all and your action and your fierce action to the table. Fierce action is one of our core values in our business as well. Bringing that to the game. And then the third thing is get in the right room. As iron sharpens iron, so one man will sharpen another. And I also learned I had a lot of really kind of scary lessons in the mastermind as well, because there were a lot of sharks and I was very naive in going into business. And so that's another thing is any of these masterminds that you join, don't be quick to hire people who are in the mastermind. Some people join masterminds just to network, just to sell you their stuff. And so I'm just going to say it, but I had to learn the hard way about, what kind of questions to ask and how to really determine if these are the right people to hire. I mean, I've got a whole journey of hiring the wrong people and finding the right people. And we have never been in a better place with our team than we've ever been. And that's how it should be, right? But lots of learning curves, lots of mistakes. And so joining a mastermind doesn't necessarily mean that every single person in there should be your best friend or that you should be hiring people just because they're in the mastermind. You're there to learn and to glean something, depending on the kind of mastermind you're joining, right? I've learned now that I joined that particular mastermind. If I was going to ever up my levels a little bit and rejoin into new heights there, I would just have a whole different mindset and frame of mind around it. So also, just because people call their stuff kingdom doesn't necessarily mean that it's kingdom either. Make sure that you are, and these are things that I've learned the hard way. So I'm encouraging you, these are just some tips that I want to give you to think about. But just because somebody uses the word kingdom doesn't mean that they're actually practicing kingdom principles in what they're teaching. Make sure that there is actually substance in their offer. And so a lot of these mastermind leaders are actually really good marketing people, really good marketers, and they're really good salespeople. And so just because they can sell you on a $10,000 or a $50,000 mastermind doesn't mean that there's going to be an incredible amount of value. And so make sure you talk to the people who are in there. What exactly is it? Be very clear on what your goals are. Some masterminds are there because they want to help you foster a relationship with other like-minded individuals. That's amazing. Do that if that's what you need. If you're looking for marketing, find the right marketer. if you're looking for connection and community and kingdom, like find the right place to be, ask the right questions, and go in with eyes wide open. I hope that that is encouraging to you. As I'm creating this content as well, I would love to know what's resonating with you specifically. What do you have more questions about? What do you want me to go deeper on? Because there's so many topics I can talk about. And what I'm doing right now is I'm speaking from my heart. And but what I really want to do is help you solve specific problems. And so share with us in the comments. Send us a message, email us anytime, ping us on social if you need to. I'm actually not in any of my socials. I just want to tell everyone that, because we get messages and people think that they're talking or they're reaching out to me specifically. I'm actually not in any of my social. That's a really beautiful thing about having a team now, is I can't build and do what I'm doing and create and be answering messages from people. As much as I would love to do that, I just can't do it at this stage of our business. And so I've set up things in place so that our team is nurturing people who come in the door and have questions and have needs. And so I want to hear from you. Sometimes I love to actually sit down and just respond myself. And so sometimes that will happen. So if you want to give it a try and reach out anytime, you might end up getting me. But I'm so proud of you being here. I'm proud of the work that you're doing. Keep wrestling, keep pressing, keep advancing. The kingdom of heaven suffers violence, but the violent, the assertive, take it by force. Don't let any resistance in the process be an excuse for you to say, well, God must not have wanted me to X, Y, Z. No, listen, there's going to be resistance as you're building. Man, there is going to be opposition. But guess what? When we seek God, he gives us peace and he gives us the way out into victory. And so we've got to use our minds. We've got to be logical and practical and apply the spiritual principles. And so I have so much more to share with you. I want to hear from you, and I love you guys so much, and we'll see you more on the inside. Thanks for listening to today's show. Hit subscribe or follow, and be sure to share this episode with a friend.